What's up, everybody? This is Trey Biddy with HawgSports.com, HawgSports.com. It's time to take a deep dive into Saturday's matchup between Arkansas and Ole Miss. Curtis Wilkerson from HawgSports.com is going to join us to talk a little bit about the Ole Miss offense. We're also going to lean on David Johnson from Ole Miss Spirit, the co-publisher there, to give a little more insight on the Rebels. From your number one independent source on the Razorbacks, this is your Arkansas versus Ole Miss primer. And before we get started, y'all aren't going to believe how many ways there are to watch and listen. You can always tune in on Facebook Live, of course, except for on Monday when the site was down. But usually you can tune in on Facebook Live, also available on YouTube. Throw us a thumbs up or a like on both of those channels. Be sure to follow the Facebook page and be sure to subscribe to the YouTube page. And also hit the notifications bell so you're alerted anytime we upload new videos. Also available on Apple Podcasts, whether you're listening on Facebook Live or YouTube or Apple Podcasts. Take a minute to go over to our Apple Podcast page. Make sure you subscribe there and give us that 5-star review that you know you've been waiting to do. You wanted to do it, you just haven't had an opportunity, so now's a perfect time to go give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Say something nice about the show to let other people know what to expect. Also available on Spotify, Stitcher, anywhere else you can think of to find your favorite podcast. Hawg Sports is just $1 right now for your first month. HawgSports.com. Sign up for our free breaking news text alerts and our newsletter where we deliver free Razorback content to your email inbox each morning. And, of course, any breaking news stuff. All right. Arkansas and Ole Miss. Number 13 Arkansas versus number 17 Ole Miss in Oxford. This game is at 11 a.m. on ESPN. It is the second of 3 straight 11 o'clock games. It is on ESPN. I mean, it's not like it's SEC Network alternate channel, right? It's on ESPN. Vaught-Hemingway Stadium, 64,038 capacity. I don't guess I've been to Vaught-Hemingway since – I hadn't been in a little bit to Vaught-Hemingway, so – going to be an interesting trip. I don't think the stadium was renovated since the last time it was. Forecast calls for 78 degrees, no chance of rain. Ole Miss is a current 6-point favorite. You've seen it also at 6.5 points, and the over/under is at 66.5. So obviously both of those teams, Arkansas and Ole Miss, coming off losses against the two best teams in the SEC, and maybe at least what the rankings say, the two best teams in the country right now. Just a couple of housekeeping things as we like to do. Sam Pittman discussed the new scholarship rules. So for those of you who aren't familiar, you can sign 25 players in a year, period. Whether it's giving a new walk-on a scholarship that hasn't been on campus at least a year, or bringing high school players or transfers or any of that stuff. It's 25. That's the limit. But now, depending on how many players you have leave the program, you can have up to 7 additional players out of the transfer portal. So you can sign 25 out of high school, and if you have 7 players leave, you can sign 7 more. Now, what's interesting about this is you have, just to sign 25 a year, if you want to sign 25 new players a year, you have to, on average, have about 7 players leave your program each year. So say you redshirt half the class, and then 5 years later, you're going to have way more than 85, which is the maximum you can have. So you got to have 7 players leave your program anyway each year just to sign 25 high school kids. And now you can also sign 7 more if you have those 7 players leave. I mean, so it's an interesting balancing act. There's so much that's changed with the rules in college football recently, especially when we're talking about scholarships and NIL and transfer portal and immediate eligibility, all of that kind of stuff. We're not getting to Danny West today, but we had Danny on Monday. Since then, he's written an article including a breakdown of 17 new Razorback scholarship offers. It's a really great story. You're going to need a VIP membership. It's just $1 again for your first month, but you need a VIP membership to read all of Danny's recruiting stuff. But it's a nice breakdown on some, not just like 2022, but 2023. And also that's something to look at too, because up until now, Arkansas's kind of been full in terms of scholarships. But now we're looking at it and going, maybe they got a shot to add some more guys, go back on some guys. So some things could start, ticking up a little bit in terms of recruiting. So this feels to me like a pretty even matchup between what I would call two very different programs. Obviously, Arkansas leans a little bit more on the defense. Ole Miss likes to go up-tempo, fast on offense. To me, the first edge you have to give Ole Miss is Matt Corral. I think a lot of Arkansas fans look at it and say, hey, he threw 6 interceptions against Arkansas last year. Well, he hasn't thrown a single interception this year. Maybe he's due. I don't know, but I got to think that's going to be motivation for him. I look at a guy that gets the ball out extremely fast, has a live arm, is scary with his legs too. He averages like 40-something, or at least going into I haven't looked at his numbers since the Alabama game, but before that he was averaging like 40-something yards per carry, or excuse me, yards per game on the ground, not per carry. But he is elusive and can run and has a really live arm. What's impressive to me is just how fast he gets the ball out, just super quick getting the ball out. Now he's going to not have Mingo, one of his top receivers, his left guard possibly out with an ankle injury. There is reports of Jerrion Ely also out with concussion protocol, who's the top running back or one of the top 2 running backs, probably the top one. So maybe some injury issues for Ole Miss here and there. Arkansas feels at least pretty much overall healthy. So maybe a little bit of an edge over there for Arkansas. I think a big point of this one is also, penalty flags. Arkansas twice this year has committed 13 penalties, or at least accepted 13 penalties. There were a lot more flags thrown against Georgia than 13. Arkansas did not handle that environment very well. They have to get this cleaned up because this is the kind of game where it's so close that penalties and special teams could play a role. And Ole Miss is better suited on offense to overcome. Ole Miss commits a lot of penalties too, but they're better suited on offense to overcome these penalties. Arkansas special teams have been an issue time after time. Now, maybe one game, I think, Texas, they got lucky though. I mean, there could have been a disaster in that game, but they got kind of lucky. They had one, bouncing off the upright. Greg Brooks, his fumble, the guy had barely stepping out of bounds. I mean, so there are some possible issues in that one. So they've got to get special teams cleaned up, and they can't have 13 penalties. Against Texas, they had 4 penalties, and obviously it was a lot cleaner game. Arkansas playing on the road for the 3rd straight week now. Technically, one was a neutral site game, but still 3 times away from home 3 weeks in a row. And I think that probably plays into Ole Miss's favor also. Score prediction, I don't know. It's so close. I usually go with the home team. I'm not convinced that Arkansas is not going to win the game, but maybe 35-31 Ole Miss. I'm not settled on that score yet, but I pull back and forth on things, and I like a lot of things that Arkansas has going on personnel-wise and matchup-wise. I just don't like the penalties, and I don't like the special teams and the road trip. And a quarterback who's looking to prove himself and has the ability to do that after how things went last season. Now, I think that 4th downs are going to play a big role because Lane Kiffin is going to go for it on 4th down in certain situations. I think he set the tone for his team in a bad way against Alabama. And I think he cost Arkansas a game in a large way by making those calls last year in Fayetteville. If you look at how last year went for Ole Miss, their drives had 16 drives. The first drive, after Arkansas punted, their first drive was a fumble on 4th and goal at the 2-yard line. So they didn't get it, first of all, but there was also a fumble. Second was a punt. Then they threw an interception. Corral did, obviously. And then Corral threw a pick 6. And then they had a turnover on downs when they went for it on 4th down again and didn't get it. Then they had a punt, another punt. Then they ran one play, and it was the end of the half. They had a turnover on downs after that. Then they scored a touchdown. Didn't score until second half, 3rd quarter. Then they had an interception. Then another interception. Then a touchdown. Then another touchdown. Then a pick 6 and an interception. Is that right? Is that possible? Did I name off 6 interceptions? It felt like I named off 12 interceptions. That's what it felt like. Arkansas just kept picking them off. But the times that it wasn't interceptions, there's a few punts in there and a few touchdowns in there. But other than that, most of the drives ended out of 16 with an interception or a turnover on downs, time and time again. And it cost them also. And I know the analytics tell them to do that, but I personally think, you look at analytics and stuff. Ole Miss also went for it on their own 4th, and not on their own 20 inside their own 30-yard line. And I get it, it's Alabama. You got to have some things like that to swing the percentages in your favor. But to me, that first drive that they had against Alabama, where they go for it down in at the goal line and don't get it, like when I'm looking at the matchup, can we move these guys up front first of all? Because Alabama did it too. Alabama went for it and got it because they've got the hosses to move you. But man, I would look at a little bit of feel there also, which I think Sam Pittman does a little bit more. But to me, And Arkansas has done this too. They've gone for it, and it's created a bit of a momentum swing. It happened against Texas A&M. It happened against Texas A&M. Texas A&M ended up going down the field and scoring for their first points of the game right before half. But to me, I feel like you had an opportunity to just put points on the board, not really change anything, but get points. It's a positive thing for you. And instead, you go for it, you don't get it, and it creates this huge momentum swing on the road. You almost decide what the game is going to turn out like by doing that right there. And then Alabama, of course, marches down and scores on their first possession. Ole Miss has improved overall. Just looking at their defense, they're improved a good deal actually from last season. When you look at them, last year they were 519 yards per game allowed on defense, which is worse than the SEC, and also 38.3 points allowed, which was also worse. This season, they're 12th in the SEC, but it's 371.3 yards per game allowed. Okay, and they're 12th with 26 points per game surrendered. They're actually, the points per game surrendered right now are pretty low compared to last year, but teams are running the ball a lot better at the same time. But we haven't played enough SEC games to really kind of compare this year to last year too much. But they do seem like at least that they're playing a little bit better there on defense. Arkansas needs to have sustained drives on offense to keep the defense off the field, keep Ole Miss's offense off the field. So more sustained drives, but they can't just milk it. And that's something that Sam Pittman brought up on Wednesday. You can't just take the clock down to 40. So that's not Arkansas's offense. Arkansas wants to go fast also. But Arkansas just needs to have success, sustained drives, get first downs, score when there are opportunities. But that's not the end of the world if your defense is playing well. Just continue to move the chains, play the field position battle, those kind of things. Play good defense. Another key element, I think, is toning down this crowd. It's an 11 a.m. crowd. That didn't matter last week in Sanford Stadium at all. I mean, they were rowdy from the start. And Arkansas gave them plenty of reason to be rowdy because they jumped offside right in front of the student section on the first two plays on offense. Of course they're going to go crazy. And it's sustained the whole time because they knew that they had gotten in Arkansas's head. So Arkansas needs to come out fast. And as Pittman says, yeah, we want to start fast every game, but I think it's particularly important in this one. When you look at the battle in the trenches, Arkansas 6'6", 317. Sam Williams is probably their best defensive lineman. He has a sack in every game. Leads the SEC with 1.25 sacks. Remember, they've already had a bye week, so leads the SEC with 1.25 sacks per game. Super senior. He's got to keep an eye on, absolutely. Now, for Arkansas, there could be a little bit of a mix-up here and there. I don't think that they're going to start Jalen St. John, and definitely not Takias Crawford, just based on what we've seen in practice so far. But those guys are starting to get looks, and I think we'll see them at some point in the game. But I think you'll probably see Arkansas's regular starting offensive line. For those who don't know, Jalen St. John is massive. Takias Crawford's massive. They're both second-year players who they're going to start looking at maybe incorporating them in. They did the same with Dan Skipper and Denver Kirkland back in Sam Pittman's – is that his first year at Arkansas? Yeah, that was his first year at Arkansas. I believe it was the Rutgers game where they started doing that. Somebody may correct me on that. When you look at the pass game, Arkansas's pass game versus Ole Miss pass defense, obviously KJ didn't play very well last weekend, 8 of 13 for 65 yards, ran 8 times for 5 yards. So, while he hasn't been deathly accurate this year, he's 59.3%. He's still done a great job for the most part connecting on the deep ball. He's averaging, which is an SEC leading, 10 yards per passing attempt. That leads the SEC. So compare that to Matt Corral. Matt Corral is second at 9.7. But he also averages 10 percentage points higher per completion than KJ. So KJ is completing at a less higher rate, but when he does complete it, it's going for a lot longer. So I think that's notable. Obviously got to get that back on track. Got to get Traylon Burks back on track in this one. What did he have? 3 catches, 5. He only had 10 yards last week. So got to get him back on track. As I mentioned, Ole Miss gives up 216.8 passing yards per game, which ranks 10th in the conference. Traylon has 22 catches for 383 yards and a pair of touchdowns this season, but just 3 grabs for 10 yards last weekend. So get him going again. And it would be nice to find a reliable option after him. Tyson Morris, I think Tyson just has 3 catches the last 2 games or so. It's not like he's been their second guy, but Warren Thompson, get him going. Devion Warren, Blake Kern get back on track. Maybe Hudson Henry starts getting healthy again. We can see him some more maybe. When you look at the run defense versus Arkansas's running game, Arkansas is fifth in the SEC with 223.8. Obviously, Georgia held them to 75 yards. They're not going to run into a lot of defenses like that. I think there are a handful of defenses like that, to me, that can hold Arkansas down in the rushing department like that across the country. Jefferson's also a big part of the running game, actually second leading rusher on the team with 40 carries for 235 yards with a pair of touchdowns. Traylon Smith's leading the way with 62 carries for 302 yards and 3 touchdowns, 4.9 yards per carry. Seems like they didn't feel like he was the best option against Georgia. He only had 3 carries for 4 yards in that one. I looked at, Rocket Sanders is intriguing. He actually played pretty well, 43 total yards, had a 22-yard catch against Georgia. A.J. Green can obviously pull away from anybody at any time. But Dominic Johnson, to me, I still think that he had 2 carries for 6 yards against Georgia, okay? And this is a guy at 6'1", 235 who leads the team in yards per carry, 6.8 yards per carry, and has the longest run from scrimmage at 48 yards. For a guy, and that was actually his last carry in that game, and there was plenty of time left. To me, he's earned more. I think he has earned more opportunities than what he's getting. That's my opinion. I mean, he runs well every time he's out there. He certainly earned more than 2 carries. Ole Miss gives up an average of 154.5 rushing yards per game on the ground, which ranks 12th in the SEC. So, a little bit of a snapshot there on the Ole Miss Rebels. But I want to go to David Johnson now. For those of you who don't follow David, you can follow him at Rebels247. He's the co-publisher at Ole Miss Spirit, which has been in existence for a really long time and has been with the 24/7 Sports Network for, I guess, 4 or 5 years now. Where is he? Where are you, David? There you go. We've had David on the show. I know we had him on last year.
Hello.
David, my friend, how you doing?
I'm good.
Well, it's good to have you on, and it's been, I guess, probably a year since we spoke to you last time, and obviously provided a lot of insight. That game obviously didn't go Ole Miss's way. Just jumping in right now, what do you think about this matchup this year? It looks like, to me, at least I've said, 2 fairly evenly matched teams, in my opinion, that do things a little bit differently.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, this has all the makings of a classic Ole Miss Arkansas matchup. We've seen several of those over the recent years, and it's kind of interesting. Both teams are kind of on the same trajectory, hot starts, everybody believing in them, and then they got caught up against the 2 best teams in the country, in my opinion, last weekend. So, a lot of this is going to be who bounces back from last weekend the best. And, as I'm sure we'll get into, Ole Miss battling a ton of injuries, particularly on the offensive side of the football.
Yeah, and just a couple of things here recently. Just for those who haven't read your updates yet, what are the latest with the injuries? I know you'd mentioned just a couple in the last 2 days that have popped up.
Yeah, Jonathan Mingo, who's effectively the number 2 receiver in this offense, did not play against Alabama. He was in a walking boot, has a stress fracture on his foot. He is not going to play Saturday, obviously. Then we discover on Wednesday night that the starting left guard, Caleb Warren, who is really, really good, Caleb has injured 3 ligaments in an ankle. He had surgery Thursday morning, so he's obviously a scratch for that game. And then the latest news breaking Thursday morning is Jerrion Ely, Ole Miss's former 5-star, that is, the running back in this offense, the primary guy, has been in concussion protocol all week, and he is very questionable for Saturday's game. So that's 3 offensive starters. Likely, with Ely is still kind of up in the air, but likely will not be playing Saturday against Arkansas. We don't expect starting safety Jake Springer, who is kind of a rover-type guy on that defense. He has missed every game since the season opener. We don't expect he'll be ready either on Saturday. So Ole Miss, all of a sudden, kind of banged up going into this matchup.
David Johnson joining us. Is it OM Spirit or Ole Miss Spirit? It says OM Spirit.
Ole Miss Spirit.
Ole Miss Spirit. Good. That's what I've been calling it, Ole Miss Spirit. So, David, what would you – it's probably a little bit too early right now to, like, look at how the numbers match up for this year versus last year. But just in your expert opinion, what you observed, what are the biggest differences with Ole Miss this year versus last year?
Yeah, the biggest difference is you do not have Elijah Moore in that offense. Moore, obviously, a great player last season, Matt Corral's favorite target. He had a knack for getting open. And then the other thing is you don't see the production from the tight end position this season. Kenny Yeboah, who's now with the New York Jets, was the tight end last year, and they did not replace him over the offseason. And really no one has stepped up at the tight end position. It's been more of a blocking decoy role through the first 4 games. And I expect it'll be that way the rest of the season. The talent is just not there at the tight end position for someone to emerge as a productive target. Mm-hmm. So I would say that's the 2 biggest differences in this Ole Miss offense this year versus last year. It does not mean they're any less dangerous. They found other ways of stacking up those production numbers. Jonathan Mingo, as we mentioned, will not play Saturday, but he's been a big part of that. Dontario Drummond's their top threat on the outside and in the slot position as well. He's very versatile. And, he's kind of filled the shoes of Elijah Moore, at least from a production standpoint. And the big misnomer about Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin is they're a passing team, and they're not. Mm-hmm. They run the football 57% of the time. They're one of the top rushing teams in the SEC. And, I think a lot of people get tripped up on Ole Miss in that regards, is that all you hear about is Lane Kiffin and Matt Corral. But that backfield is pretty deep, fortunately, because we don't think Ely's going to play. But there are other talented guys back there. And, so that's kind of been the difference, is the fact that, they're not getting production from the tight end position and doing it in different ways.
We talk about these 2 teams, as you said, doing it different ways, but with this year. But Arkansas also has had some issues with the tight end, just a player not emerging there. And I think there's also kind of a misnomer with Kendall Browse's offense that he really wants to run the ball too, and that's when the offense is at their best too. Flipping you over to defense real quick, David, we talked about this a little bit, but Sam Williams is averaging 1.25. He has a sack in every game so far this season. And Ole Miss, and this is something Sam Pittman brought up, but Ole Miss did really well in the transfer portal with guys like Chance Campbell and Otis Reese. Just give us a little bit of insight on that defense and some of the strengths.
Yeah, well, first of all, I cannot wait to see the Williams brothers, if you will, on Saturday. Sam Williams and Trey Williams are going to affect the outcome of this game. I truly believe that. I think both of them are certainly within the top 5 pass rushers in the SEC, and I think it's going to be fun to watch those guys go up against the opposing offensive lines. But, when you look at that Ole Miss defense this year, it has definitely improved from where it was. They're basing out of a 3-2-6. Over the offseason, the Ole Miss coaches spent some time with the Iowa State coaching staff and really learned the intricacies of incorporating a 3-2-6. It's worked out well for them in most cases. Alabama was certainly able to run on them in that alignment. But, the transfers, Chance Campbell, a big-time transfer, came in from the University of Maryland. And he's immediately kind of become the ball hog on that Ole Miss defense. He's always around the ball. He's a very physical, very tough kid, and very, very intelligent. I think he's comparable to a couple of those linebackers you guys have in Arkansas. Otis Reese, not a new guy, but a guy who didn't get to play until the last 3 games last season because of NCAA eligibility issues, dealing with his transfer. He made an immediate impact to that defense last year at the safety position. He's been doing it this year as well. He and Campbell are the guys that are generally making the most tackles. As we mentioned, Sam Williams, Ole Miss has an elite pass rusher. They're going to move him around Saturday. I think try him out on both sides of the Arkansas offensive line. Secondary, they've got some bodies back there. They've got depth. They're able to rotate and kind of stay fresh on the back end of that defense, and it's really, truly helped them out.
David Johnson joining us from Ole Miss Spirit. Again, you can follow David at Rebels247 on Twitter, and certainly does a great job over there. I want to get you out with this. It's kind of prediction time. You don't have to give a score if you're not ready to. We'd love to have one, but if you're not ready, you don't have to. How do you see this game playing out, David?
Yeah, I think if you want to start off with the Vegas line of, any way it opened anywhere from 3.5, 4.5 to 6 points in favor of Arkansas. I'm not saying who's going to win this game, but I think the gap in the final score is going to be bigger than that. I mean, I look for this to be a 10-point to 2-touchdown win for whichever team emerges. And I'll be honest with you, Trey. I've started playing this out in my mind. I've been watching film on Arkansas. I'm very familiar with KJ Jefferson, of course, as we covered his recruitment. He grew up 20 miles from Oxford. Mm-hmm. And I still don't know who's going to win this game or who I think is going to win this game because, there's so many intangibles and variables. Who's going to respond best to the butt whoopings they took last weekend? I think that's something we just don't know. We don't know about that. How's Matt Corral going to handle drop 8 coverage this year against Arkansas, and the extra stuff Sam Pittman and Odom are going to throw at him because it's coming. We know Sam Pittman's not going to roll into town with the exact same defensive game plan he had last year. There are going to be some kinks to that thing, and how will Ole Miss adjust to it? So, all of it's on the line, but I don't know who's going to win this game, to be honest with you. And I'm being totally honest with you. I will roll out a pick because I have to on Friday, but I will not do so with any degree of confidence.
I'm kind of in the same boat as you there. We got a lot in common, it seems like, and I think it could be a benefit also for both offenses having gone against drop 8 type of defenses all through camp this past year too. So that's something maybe to look at. And I think probably one maybe intangible that you could look at too is Ole Miss likes to go for it on 4th down a lot. How many times are those successful and how many times aren't they? And last year was a good example too, not just that Alabama game last week, but last year in Fayetteville, that opening drive was a 4th down right at the goal line, just like it happened last week, and it was a big momentum swinger.
Yeah, and Ole Miss has really good numbers going forward on 4th down. But I pointed out on our Talk of Champions podcast this morning, the way you need to look at that 4th down conversion rate is non-conference opponents and SEC opponents. They were not nearly as successful against an SEC defense at Alabama last weekend than they were against Louisville, Austin Peay, and Tulane. So, is the 4th down stuff going to work? We'll see. We'll see. Yeah, you're right, though. There will be some going for it on 4th down Saturday. That much we know for sure. But I'll tell you, Trey, we talk about Matt Corral and KJ Jefferson. I think the ground game's going to decide this. Mm-hmm. Whoever runs the ball best wins this game. Yeah,
that's a good point. All right, David. Well, hopefully we'll see you on Saturday. You going to be in the press box on Saturday?
Absolutely, Trey. Okay. Looking forward to seeing. Look, the last time I sat next to you, I was scared to death. I gave you COVID. So I've been fully vaccinated. I've got natural immunity. Yeah. So you're safe. You're safe on Saturday, man.
All right. Appreciate you, David, and thanks for not giving me COVID. And I certainly know you've been through it, and we're glad to hear you.
Man. Yeah. It worried the heck out of me.
All right.
But
thanks.
Doing good. All right, man. I'll see you on Saturday, and we'll eat a biscuit together.
All right. Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Bye. All right, everybody. David Johnson from from Ole Miss Spirit. Rebels at Rebels247. You can follow him on Twitter, and that's an interesting story he brings up because literally, the day before they shut down the SEC tournament because of COVID, like right before they started shutting everything down, I was in Nashville, and David and I sat next to each other for about 6 hours, and David was too sick to go to the dinner that night. His symptoms started coming on after that, and I'd been sitting by him shoulder to shoulder, like literally touching shoulders the whole time, and didn't come down with COVID. So crazy illness, and David really had to battle through that. And if you remember last year we had him on a show, his voice did not sound nearly as good because he'd had the what is it called, the thing that goes down your throat. I'll leave that to the doctors. But doing a lot better now, and certainly thankful for that, for David. All right. Where are we going next? We got to go to Curtis. If you got questions, go ahead and get them in. We're going to go to Curtis now. He's going to talk a little bit more about what he's learned about the matchup with Arkansas. We got to get a new picture of Curtis. That Curtis picture a little old. But Curtis is going to give us a little more insight on Arkansas's defense and how it matches up with the offense. We like to split it up a little bit and that way we get a little bit deeper dive into both sides of the ball. Curtis, how you doing,
Trey,
man?
I'm good. I'm doing all right. I'm really looking forward to this game this weekend. I think it's going to be a good one.
I think so too. I think it has the makings, as David was saying, who we just had on, as being one of the kind of classic Arkansas Ole Miss matchups. There's been so many great meetings in this one, and in a game, a series that goes back way beyond most of Arkansas's opponents in the SEC, just because they used to play each other so often back in the day. So it should be a classic matchup. I'm looking forward to getting to Oxford. Not particularly looking forward to the drive, but because there's no good way to really get there. As we mentioned, some guy suggested, Curtis, that I just fly to Memphis and then drive. And I'm just like, well, when you factor in the flight, the time to drive to the airport, getting there early, rental car stuff, it's a $490 ticket, first of all, and then you got to get a rental car, and it's like 4 hours of doing all that stuff, and the drive is like 6 hours. So it just doesn't make any sense. There's no like great way to get there. It's not like, I'm definitely flying to Oxford or to Memphis. But anyway, this is when you need a private jet so you can just fly into cities like that.
You don't have one of those?
I don't. I've been looking at a couple of G5s, but just hadn't pulled the trigger on it yet.
Well, in due time.
Hope so. All right, Curtis. You always do Keys to Victory, 5 burning questions, one of our favorite stories. The keys to victory, always pretty much the same. It's penalties, it's turnovers, special teams, injuries, and you always add a 5th one. And I think you nailed it this week because we talked about it a little bit already, but 4th down, because we know Ole Miss is going to go for it on some 4th down situations.
Yeah, it's so true. And just to quickly hit on those other ones, and you're right, we keep those other 4 the same every week. And I got to tell you, I dread redoing this story after every game. We go back and we answer, the 5 burning questions and see how the keys to victory played out. And I dread going back to penalties and special teams every week. It's just been wild with the penalties. And, you look at the struggles Ole Miss has had to that regard too. And, it's going to be interesting. I wonder what the over-under is set on for flags in this one. And then, special teams, I just hope to see Arkansas simplify things a little bit, hey, catch the kicks and the punts, and let's see if we can avoid getting a punt block there, and just kind of take it from there. I know people have been frustrated with that, but yeah, the 4th downs, I just think it's so interesting the way Kiffin plays that, and I thought you pretty much nailed it when you were talking about it earlier, and that can be huge. It's just such a big momentum swing one way or the other, when you do that. And, Arkansas came up with some key stops to that regard last year in that game, and you mentioned some of those. And, I think it also depends on where they're at. In some cases, there's going to be times where, and you've talked about taking your medicine, but, Ole Miss is probably going to be in a position where they've got a pretty good opportunity to put 3 points on the board, and chances are they're going to go for it. Mm-hmm. And so if Arkansas is able to come up with stops in a couple of those situations, hey, that's 3 points the Rebels aren't getting, and an opportunity for 7 that Arkansas could. So that could be a big swing, and I agree. I think it's going to be a huge key to the game.
Curtis Wilkerson joining us. If you don't follow Curtis, you can follow him at @KurtWilkerson_ on Twitter. He is our primary basketball beat guy, does a great job, also covers hoops recruiting, and chips in everywhere really with football, everything, baseball. You can find a lot of information from Curtis Wilkerson if you just follow him on Twitter, and then of course read his stuff on HawgSports. But most of the basketball stuff is VIP, especially the recruiting stuff. That is something you'll need a VIP subscription for. Curtis, you also asked 5 questions. I just really want to touch on one of those, but who bounces back on this one from a humbling loss? The other question is just real quick. Can Arkansas corral again? Not a very original headline there, Curtis, but we'll give you a pass on that. Razorback rushing attack ready for a rebound, ? Any shakeups on the offensive line for Arkansas? And Arkansas's defense ready to slow the lane train? So those are the other questions, but I really want to touch on this one. Who bounces back the best from a humbling loss? Because so much of this game is mental. Who do you think has the best chance to come back from something like that?
Yeah, well, normally I would probably lean towards the home team.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of given the atmosphere, you got a little extra adrenaline, and they call those crazy crowds, 12 man and things like that for a reason. It can provide a boost. So I think under a normal circumstance, I would probably lean towards Ole Miss being able to kind of shake it off there. But there is just something about this Arkansas group and kind of the mentality that Sam Pittman has instilled there, the blue collar, hard work. They've really responded, I think, in the face of adversity pretty much every time they faced it since Pittman took over. So I think they're probably approaching it the right way, and I think they're going to play a lot better, obviously. And it's a long football game, but I do think that a quick start is going to be important.
Mm-hmm.
If you come out, if you're Arkansas and you get a quick 3 and out, or force a turnover, or sustain a long drive and put some points on the board, I think it's pretty much out of the back of your mind at that point. You're moving on, you're rolling, everything is good. But on the flip side, if there's a mistake, or all of a sudden a false start before you can snap the football for the first time in the game, some of those bad memories, it's natural for those to start creeping back in your mind. And,
here we go again.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and when you're on the road like that in that environment, those fans smell blood in the water. So
yeah.
Hopefully, for Arkansas's sake, they can get off to a good start.
Yeah, you'd certainly rather be the home team after a little bit of a butt whipping, a little bit a serious butt whipping. But both teams got it. So, I guess the last thing I want to get you out of here with, just generally, when you look at Arkansas's defense versus the Ole Miss offense, who do you like better in that matchup? And do you have a score prediction you'd like to give for the game?
Sure. Well, I'll answer the first question first. I have to like the situation that Arkansas has going on defensively with Barry Odom, especially the way they kind of took over that game last year. I don't think anyone's expecting 6 interceptions from Matt Corral again, but Arkansas was just so well prepared for that one, and you've heard Pittman mention they're going to probably have a number of different wrinkles to show, in this one. And so I'm anxious to see what those are going to be. But, most of this defense is back for Arkansas, and it's a veteran group. I think they're going to be well prepared, and I think they're going to have a good showing in this one. And then you got to think about some of those injuries that Ole Miss has going on offensively. And with them, really, I think it's more about the system. Mm-hmm. And they've got a ton of playmakers in depth. You talked about Ely, who might be out for this one, but hey, Parrish and Snoop Connor, those are some good backs those guys have. But I think the key is that left guard situation they have going on. Arkansas has been tough, aside from that Georgia game on the defensive front. Ole Miss has a center they brought in as a transfer. He's still trying to kind of feel his way out and get settled in. And then he looks over to his left now, and he's going to have a backup beside him. So, if I'm a guy like, a John Ridgeway, I might be licking my chops at that matchup there. So I think that could be a key to watch. And, as far as the score prediction, for most of the week, I'll be honest, I've kind of been leaning probably Ole Miss in a close one, just for a lot of the reasons that you've talked about, with them being at home and everything like that. But, I keep looking at these injuries that are piling up a little bit, and I felt a little bit better about Arkansas's chances going, throughout the week here. And like I said, I'm kind of zeroed in on that offensive line for Ole Miss. I've been debating back and forth, but I think at the moment I've kind of swung back towards Arkansas here in a little bit of a shootout, maybe a 34-31, 31-28, something like that. Mm-hmm. So I might go with the Hogs here to get the win on the road.
All right, Curtis, good prediction. We're going to hold it to you.
People like it.
All right, brother. Well, appreciate you joining us, and I'll see you maybe when I get back from Oxford.
Hey, it sounds good. Safe travels.
All right. Thanks, brother. All right, everybody. Curtis Wilkerson. Again, Kurt Wilkerson _ on Twitter. And you need a VIP subscription if you want to read his basketball recruiting. We didn't even really get into the Nick Smith stuff. It's kind of happened a while back, but you can read his breakdowns on the Nick Smith commitment, who was the second highest rated commitment all time for Arkansas in the rankings era since 2002, I guess. and the highest rated expected to make it to campus because Al Jefferson didn't make it. So, all right. One last time before we jump into your questions, got to remind you there's plenty of ways to watch and listen. Always tune in on Facebook Live and YouTube. Throw us a like or a thumbs up on both of those channels if you haven't done so. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, or if you're listening somewhere else, pop over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify, Stitcher. Throw us a 5-star rating and leave a review for others to know what to expect. We certainly appreciate that. We notice a boost every time. Share the content with somebody else if you think they might like it. Also, you got a dad, granddad, grandma, mom, or something doesn't know about the show, or a buddy. Just let them know about the show. Just send them a link, and maybe they'll like it too. All right. We good? I feel like we're good. Let's see those questions. Only good, well thought out, intriguing questions today. All right. Blake Rutan says, I hate you, Facebook. Just rolled off. Sorry, Blake. Marty Martin says, so we know that Ole Miss is taking a bit of Odom's defensive scheme. Logic says that it would be to our advantage. What's your thoughts? I mean, I think it's an advantage for both teams to go up against a drop 8 defense all fall camp. You know, I can remember in 2017 against Auburn, Arkansas had a bye week before, and they spent the whole 2 weeks installing an up-tempo, hurry-up spread offense to go against Gus Malzahn in Auburn. And I was just thinking, so you're going to run the offense that their defense looked at all fall camp. That's going to work. So I think maybe it's a benefit to both teams. I think the fact that Arkansas has been doing it a little bit longer maybe is an advantage. Definitely think it's an advantage. Tyler Eagle says, will we have a rusher for over 100 yards? Yes, Arkansas will have a rusher go over 100 yards. How do you like that answer? Elder Regional Allen says, wow, Trey, do you have any confidence in the Hogs? You continue to pick them to lose. Sheesh, man, at least give them the benefit of the doubt. Are you a Hog fan or not? Technically, I'm a media person, so I will continue to predict the way I want to predict. I'm 4-1 right now, so I mean, I'm going to try to get it accurate. And I think there's also a little bit of jinx mojo in there too. Like sometimes if I'm too high on the Hog, then the universe comes back and shows me that how wrong I am. So you have to understand how my mind works, Elder. But I'm going to predict the way I think I should predict and try to be as objective as possible. Jonathan Bowler says, good to hear, listening at work. Appreciate you. Mark Douglas says, hopefully the hostile environment experienced last week will be a catalyst on what they need to work on this week to know what to expect and encounter. I mean, I would have to ask also, Elder, did you want me to pick them against Georgia? Did you want me to pick them to beat Georgia? Would that have made everything better? Mark Douglas, we got that. Sorry. Eric Fox says, what was the line last year? I bet Ole Miss America was favored last year as well. Probably. I think they were favored because Arkansas was an underdog, has been an underdog in every single SEC game they've played. Josh Wilbanks says 24-17 Hogs win. Defensive battle. Norman Hunt says Arkansas can and should limit Ole Miss's offense possessions. That would keep the crowd noise from disrupting what we do on offense. The only reason that I'm leaning Ole Miss right now, and I get it, there's some things like to swing a little bit, feels like swing maybe in Arkansas's favor, but I still think if you're coming off of a butt whipping like we talked about, you'd rather be the home team, and both teams are coming off of that. And I don't like the penalties. I don't like the turnovers. Not turnovers. I don't like the penalties. I don't like the special teams. Turnovers are fine because they're not turning the ball over a lot. So I don't mean that. But the the penalties and the special teams, to me, are issues for Arkansas. Anybody else disagree with that? Like, do you have to be a non-Arkansas fan to see that? You guys can see that. Penalties have been an issue. Special teams have been an issue for a while. You get another punt block. To me, that's a disaster season on special teams. It's already pretty close to that. Pretty close. 2 punt blocks in a season. I mean, that's in different games. I mean, John L. Smith used to say by the numbers in the NFL, that's almost a guaranteed loss. So you get a punt block, you're losing the game almost, certainly. Now, they didn't against Rice, but, I mean, they were in a hole. They had to come out of a hole against Rice. There's another one, corral. Will Arkansas's defense be able to corral? Tim Parchman says, my God, please don't let penalties kill us again. Razorbacks 31-14. Man, I think if you think it's going to be 31-14 in Oxford, you're going to be disappointed, Tim. I'm not saying Arkansas is not going to win, but you're going on the road in an SEC game at their place. It's not like they're coached by Chad Morris. Jason Long says, and it's not Vanderbilt either, Jason Long says they're going to be picking on our 1 week DB. Intubation tube. Thanks, Jason. Eric E. Pachosa. Is Pittman going to change starters on the offensive line? I don't think he is. Now, Dalton Wagner may have a little bit of a hand issue. He had a club on his hand, so maybe they go a different route there, but I think if they did that, it would be Ty Clary. Jerome McCullum says, I think we could see Jalen St. John play and possibly Takias Crawford. Jerome McCullum says, do you think 9-3 can be a realistic season this year? Assuming we lose Bama and one other team, something through the season. So 9-3, I don't know that they get to 9 wins. I mean, they got to take care of this one, but I mean, they get Auburn at home, they get Mississippi State at home, they get Missouri at home, so that's 3 right there, right? So, I mean, that gets you to 7. You win this one, that's 8. Where's the next one? At LSU? That's possible. Maybe it's possible. I'm not saying it's not possible. I mean, LSU looks like they're starting to kind of implode a bit. But, you get those 3 home games, you win this one, you win at LSU, sure. That's a lot of winning. That's a lot of winning this season. You should be real proud if you're an Arkansas fan if that's what happens. With a chance to win 10 in a bowl game coming after what Arkansas has been the last decade. Will Causey says, will it be a good matchup of our wideouts against their corners? That's a good question. And I think Arkansas's got the advantage there. I mean, Arkansas didn't show very well there, but I would say they've got the advantage there because of Traylon Burks. And they've got some other guys that'll pop up. Warren Thompson can pop up. They really need to get Warren Thompson going. Need to get Keytron Jackson going. It's time for Keytron to start getting some looks because there's a good chance that Traylon Burks isn't going to be here after this year. And Keytron's really highly regarded. The coaches are super high on him, but he really hasn't, contributed a whole lot. And that's very typical of freshman wide receivers. I mean, as good as those guys were back in 2010, Jarius Wright and Joe Adams and Greg Childs, they all, started pretty slow, especially Jarius. Dallas Sprinkle says, do you think Ole Miss has the players to stop our backfield in a 3-2-6? You see them needing to adjust to open up the pass game? If Arkansas has success running the ball, and I think that they will, then they've got a great chance to win this game, or it's going to be a shootout. But no, I don't think that – I think Arkansas is going to have success running the game, both with KJ and the running backs. Justin Starnes says running game will make a comeback this week. I'm really hope we can get Warren more involved in the offense. Yeah, it'd be nice to get him involved. I mean, he's been there time and time, but nobody's been consistent after Burks. And Burks hasn't been consistent, really. I mean, he's had a couple of games where he's just, hasn't really been there. Landon Montgomery says, do you think Sam looked a bit rattled in the press conference right after the loss, seemed frustrated? Well, first of all, that's the first time we've seen him this season after a loss. It's on the road, and they got hammered. And I don't think they thought they were going to get hammered. I think they thought they had an uphill battle, but I don't think they thought it was going to be 37-0. So probably a little disappointed, but you look at the way they lost the game. I mean, everybody looked at it and it's like, okay, Arkansas is outclassed, but where were the problems? The problems are penalties, shooting yourself in the foot. And he got asked that question in a different way over and over again and was kind of eventually just like, hey, I mean, what do you want me to say it differently? What would you want me to – tell me what you want me to say and I'll say it kind of thing. I don't know that he was frustrated as much as didn't know how to answer the question a different way over and over again, if that makes sense. Jerome McCullum says 9-3 realistic. I answered that one. How did I go backwards? Blake Rutan says, I'm not sure their butt whipping is that comparable to ours. Man, that was a rough shutout. I mean, it was. Alabama just kind of eased up on it. Ole Miss was scoring late. It wasn't it wasn't happening early. Alabama asserted themselves pretty quickly. And this was a game a lot of people, you go look at Ole Miss's board and, look at their expert picks. I think there's 4 experts over there. They all picked Ole Miss to win. And a lot of their fans did. That wasn't the same. If you look at our board, And our expert picks, our 4 guys, we all picked Arkansas to lose that game against Georgia. And I think a lot of fans probably thought that was going to happen too. There were some people that were like, Georgia hadn't played anybody. You remember that narrative, right? But I think they were probably equally humbling, and both on the road. Last year was bad. This year is a little better, but not a lot of improvement. Are you crazy, Phillip? What are you talking about? For Arkansas? They've definitely improved. Joe McAdams, look at the numbers. They've definitely improved. They ran into a buzzsaw against Georgia. Joe McAdams says, so if offensive line is behind Georgia and Alabama, is it feasible to be able to recruit that caliber O-line? Arkansas has recruited a great offensive line before. And Pittman did it. Sebastian Tretola, Frank Ragnow, Denver Kirkland, Dan Skipper. All those guys were on the same offensive line and all recruited by Sam Pittman. All 4 of those guys. And they had Mitch Smothers at center, who was a good player for him too. So, yeah, do they have that line now? They have some guys that are very experienced, big guys that really want it, that are seniors and upperclassmen, returning starters. They have that right now, okay? Do they have the pure mass and just size of some of those guys? No. Now, Chiquius Crawford does. Is he ready yet? Probably not quite done cooking. Jalen St. John has that size. Probably not quite done cooking. The freshman offensive lineman, Devon Manuel, 6'9", 370 or so is what he checked in at. He's got that mass. Now, he's more of a project guy, but that's a good place to start. So we'll see what happens down the road. There's some other good-looking young players. Terry Wells is another example of a freshman that maybe a guy that has a bright future. Timothy Baca says Arkansas wins 42-31. Don Eldred says, let's never mention Western Kentucky game or quote John L. again, please. You got that. I did have a policy that his name wouldn't go mentioned, but, John L's not the worst coach to come through Arkansas ever anymore, is he? Tim Wolf says 24-21 OT for Arkansas. I forgot at UAPB. Yeah, I did. I forgot UAPB. Arkansas plays UAPB. So there's another one. So they're at 4 right now. They win at Oxford. They get the 3 home games. They win at LSU, and they beat UAPB. There's 10 regular season games right there won. Zach Van says it's a 50-50 game. I think so, too. That's why it's a 50-50 game. I go with the home team. That's the main reason. And I include 50-50 like I'm looking, okay, Ole Miss has some injury issues. Arkansas has a lot of penalties. Ole Miss's offense better equipped to overcome those penalties. Arkansas has special team mistakes. So you kind of balance back and forth like that. That's, at least in my mind, that's how I do. So razor thin margin of error for the Razorbacks, absolutely. Philip Hearn says, I will say the school will have to ante up to keep Odom here. Still not 100% on Browse, but he shows some success. I don't think Odom is leaving Arkansas except for a head coaching job. And there's no amount of money for the right head coaching job that's going to keep him at Arkansas. Marquise Martin says it's time for Trey Knox to be the receiver Arkansas thought he would be, but at the tight end spot. Dustin Hoofman says fast start opens up the playbook. Be nice to see what Browse and Jefferson can get going, moving the ball down the field. Limit penalties, run the ball. Get some turnovers, keep Ole Miss off the field, says Isaac Riley. All right, let's see if we got anything kind of different now. I think we kind of covered this stuff. Ole Miss is giving free popcorn to the first 5,000 fans in the stands. Hopefully we'll make them choke on that popcorn. Just choke, though. Landon Montgomery says, I don't think a Kiven team is mature enough, is as mature as Pittman team. Arkansas is a team to bounce back. I think Arkansas's got a little more maturity. They got the quarterback edge. Corral can really sling it. We saw him at his worst, but Trey, it's okay to pick Arkansas to win, says James Hill. I don't know if it is. I don't know if the universe will allow that from me. So it's a 50-50 game, so I'm going the opposite direction. No matter what the gut says or anything, I'm going Ole Miss firmly. How about that? All right, everybody. It's a 50-50 game. I really believe it is. It's a tough one to call, so I'll go with the home team. That doesn't mean I think Arkansas won't win or can't win, because I absolutely do. I'm like 51% Ole Miss, 49 Arkansas. It's going to be a great game. I really think it has the makings to be a really fun game. Maybe a game where Arkansas jumps out, Ole Miss comes back, and Arkansas hold them off. How do these fourth downs play into it? Can Arkansas clean up penalties? Can they clean up special teams? I think both teams are going to have some success. I think Arkansas might have a little bit more success on defense, but then there's the factor of the fourth down. And as bad as it's hurt Ole Miss, David's right. They are not a bad fourth down offense. Now, they struggled against Alabama. They struggled against Arkansas last year. But that swings some things in your favor. I mean, ask Kevin Kelly. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I want to say thanks to Curtis Wilkerson. Also, say thanks to David Johnson. Appreciate all you people consuming our free content, and really special thanks to our subscribers for being the engine that churns us. We would not be able to do what we do with this podcast, with, of course, HawgSports and everything else we do without your support. So really appreciate that. And to those of you who are thinking about subscribing, it's just $1 right now for your first month at HawgSports.com. All right, everybody. Next time I see you, come on, man, says Joseph Marquez. People give me a hard time. People gave me a hard time for picking Georgia to win. But that's just how I do it. So it's not saying Arkansas can't win. All right, everybody. Next time we talk to you, I'll be walking around Oxford, hopefully without a lawnmower in the background. So we'll try to be – if there's a lawnmower going in the background this time, we'll just stop and start over. So it'll be a start and restop walk and talk. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining me. This has been Trey Biddy with HawgSports.com, and we'll catch you next time.